Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another exciting edition of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Vaughn Smith, and this is Cisco Cloud Fundamentals, and we are going to talk about our Cisco CloudCenter components. Yes, I got through it. Okay, and here is Mr. Ronnie Wong to help us out. How are you?
I am doing well, Vaughn. Thank you again for joining us as we continue on our journey here, taking a look, of course, at getting ready for that CCNA cloud exam. And this is the first of two exams that you're actually preparing for. But the cloud fundamentals, of course, means that you have a solid understanding about the technologies that we're talking about. So that is where we're heading. We finally got to this point where we can at least show you some of that technology. In other words, do a demonstration on one of the components that's actually key in the Cisco ecosystem, if you want to, which is, of course, the Cisco CloudCenter. Now, in the previous episode, right, we did an introduction, which meant we kind of described what this actually does. And Vaughn, you and I had talked about in that previous episode that this is really the user's interface. Now, it's a user's interface in two levels, though. Okay, it actually can be where if Vaughn were actually managing her own cloud network for her own company, she could actually use it there. She'd have access by entering in a username and password, and she'd be able to do that, and that way she could manage her own things. But if I were actually the administrator of the entire cloud itself, okay, regardless of where it sits in private cloud, public cloud, or even in a data center, I could administrate that as well as, of course, multiple tenants as well, okay? But now we want to jump in and we want to make sure that you understand at least some of the components and show you how it works, at least at the most basic level, so that you have an understanding of the way that this thing does function, okay? Now, Vaughn, before we get to that, and that's always my kind of weird lead-in, right? Like, oh, yeah, we're going to do all that. But before we get to that, okay, we have to talk about some of the other services that are available from Cisco that they do call out on the exam, which, of course, is to talk about the idea of Cisco Cloud Services itself. So let me show you a couple of different things that Cisco really is proud of in terms of their cloud service offerings. So let's take a look at my desktop, and that will get us started. Okay. You can simply type in, of course, Cisco Cloud Center, or not even Cloud Center, but type in Cisco Cloud Services in your favorite search engine, and more than likely it will lead you up to this page right here. Now, what Cisco wants you to be able to do, especially if you're new to this, is to get started right away. And notice how they word everything, Vaughn, okay? Accelerate your cloud journey. They're saying, look, don't get caught up in all the technical details behind it. But let's go ahead and get you accelerated, get you working in this as quickly as they can. So instead of doing something like what AWS has and even what Azure has, right, that's actually out there that says, just go ahead and open it up and try and figure it out. And if you've ever done that, like the first time I remember opening up Azure or AWS, I just saw this string of different things I could do, but I didn't really have a clue exactly how all that stuff fit together and how it worked together. Well, Cisco says, no, we have actual professional services. In other words, they are actually people and technologists that are out there that will help you to get started right away. And the way that they do that, of course, is that they have different experts on staff that can help you to get started. So they talk about the changing dynamics, organizations find a way to innovate, and they want to carve out their particular niche market in what they call the hybrid IT. Remember that that's one of those different service deployments that we talked about. Remember that the idea of the public, private, community, and then hybrid IT in the way that we went over it. Well, they want to carve out their niche in here because they realize something. They're not going to compete really in the space of where AWS is. They're not really going to compete worldwide again with something like Azure as well, Microsoft's Azure and what they do. But in this particular hybrid world, in that managed space that's actually out there and where most of the enterprise likes to have stuff, they're saying that they can make a dent. Now, whether or not they can, only the market will tell us what is going to happen. But at this point, that is what they're pushing for, is for you to adopt this and make sure that you understand how it works a little bit.
And try to maybe customize it to your needs, because this kind of sounds almost like consulting.
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It is a consultant type of thing that they do for you. So notice they talk about drive simplicity and automation. They want to show you how this solution can do that, as well as accelerate your hybrid IT transformation. And of course, at the same time, because this is what they're in business for, is to help you reduce your risk and cost, right? Well, to a point, they're saying, hey, if you reduce your risk and cost this way inside of your business, Vaughn, that means we make more money. So it's kind of a weird trade-off, but that's essentially how the free market ends up working. So you have to kind of deal with that.
Yeah, it's a cost remove and cost implied.
Oh,
like,
nice.
yes, there's my
terms.
ITIL
That's
training
right,
coming
yes.
out. And it's always about like risk removes, risk implied, like how when you're paying for it, they take on the risk,
Yeah.
and all that kind of
Transferring
good
risk.
stuff.
Yeah, look at that. There you go.
Look at that framework coming out, and I just kind of trailed off because then I started to forget how to talk about it.
So they have this solution, right? They have all these different services that are out there that will let you to, that will allow you to be able to actually see what experts have to say. They've got some pre-recorded things that you can listen to on iTunes as well as on SoundCloud. Yet they have all that, of course. And then if you're working in the container space, which is by far probably one of the biggest and fastest growing areas of cloud, is the idea of container solutions that are out there. Well, they of course want you to make sure that you can get access to this too.
Is that on like Docker that I
Yeah.
hear Justin talk about? I
Docker,
don't exactly know
Kubernetes
what
and
it
stuff
is,
like
but
that.
I always hear him talking about it.
Yeah, it is that particular space where you're starting to see that idea come into. And of course, the new term for everything is serverless applications. You name it, there's a bunch of different ones. And so they have all these advisory services that will help you to get started from developing a roadmap to making sure you can get into this as quickly as you can. And then if you need help in implementation, they can even help you here, making sure that you understand all the dependency mappings as well as security offerings that are actually available. And once that gets set up, of course, how do you optimize it? How do you get started? And then do you need any technical services, that will help you to make sure that you can keep it managing and monitoring and functioning the way that you need to. So overall, though, they have a lot of different services when you start to take a look. And we are going to be focusing on one particular service, really, okay, which is going to be the idea of just the CloudCenter itself is where we are going to focus.
Now, this is an exam objective.
Yes, it is.
To understanding the cloud services. So when it goes into like these different pieces on this website, do we need to know like all the different offerings and like a brief description of each one? I mean, that almost sounds kind of like a weird thing to be tested on.
Yeah, it is a weird thing, and more than likely, you're not going to be tested heavily on this. But what they're saying, again, is given a scenario, if you didn't know how you were to get access into a cloud environment in terms of getting started, well, what's the proper solution? So you can kind of think about a scenario like this, Vaughn. What if I actually listed to you A, B, C, and D here, and A was know what the actual definition of cloud services is. B, what are the Cisco cloud services? Or C, which we're about to talk about, the idea of the Cisco CloudCenter. So we might think that jumping into CloudCenter might be the way that we get started in terms of getting started in. But overall, though, if you don't know anything about the cloud and you're asked to actually present a solution, your solution would probably be something like this: is understanding with the Cisco cloud services that you can get advice, you can get implementation matters, you can also be advised on, of course, optimization as well as security. You, of course, can get technical support all from this type of solution that you can have, of course, at a price. So nothing's always, ever 100% free.
Okay, so super high level, just understand that this Cisco Cloud Services provides you with these general things. And so go through their website, look at some of the documentation, and then we'll get into how the thing actually works, which is part of the components.
Yeah, so that's why I really, even though they divided up into some featured services like what we're taking a look at here on the screen, we're really going to focus in on this idea of the Cisco CloudCenter is the one that we're focusing on. And because, well, that's the one that's specifically called out on the exam. Now, it doesn't mean that the rest of these aren't available out there, but for those of you that are heading on towards the entire CCNA cloud, that will be in your cloud administration is where you'll end up finding that stuff out. In other words, how to actually get all that stuff working. But there are some, let me make sure I kind of tell you here, okay? So there's a couple of different things, right? So you want to look at the technicality behind it, okay? Well, Cisco has, of course, all the cloud products too. So they want you, of course, to be all Cisco-centric so that they can offer all of these different things. But in today's world of IT, you're seeing more of a move instead of a single monolithic company where it's like, just buy all Cisco equipment and don't worry about it. You're starting to see where people are picking and choosing instead from different solutions that are available, from networking to management, data centers, you name it. But Cisco says, hey, we've got a lot of this all put together. And they, of course, have a list of some of the things that you can actually come together and be able to actually get access to as well, okay? So just realize that they do have many different products. They're not going to test you on every single one of them, since this is the idea of fundamentals of cloud. All these have their own product and can probably even be expanded into a certification track on their own, but at least know that there's plenty of products to cover just about everything that you can think of. So since we're focusing in on Cisco Cloud, they also have this nice little PDF here for the person that is, again, the decision maker, or for understanding like why would we choose to use something like this. And I like this document here because essentially where you see the term benefit there, okay? The idea is fairly clear, okay? Accelerate your business outcomes by identifying the actual management case that you need. They're saying that, hey, CloudCenter can actually help you to do that, okay? Deploy workloads, verify regions, etc. Reduce complexity. And to me, that's probably the key one that most people are really going to glom onto, of anything. And then, of course, prepare the operations to manage and scale this effectively.
To me, like those types of bullet points is what they're probably looking for in this exam objectives. Again, like what will it do for you?
Yeah, at least at a general sense, does this product help you to do these things?
Yes,
okay?
exactly.
So just making sure you understand that. And it's a nice little one that's actually out there for you. And I think it was actually a link. I'll tell you the truth. It actually is a link like this one, view at a glance, right down here. So if you go, like I told you, you type in the idea of Cisco cloud services, you'll come to this page, in your favorite search engine, and then you're ready to go. Okay, so all that's actually right there, and we'll include that link inside of the notes for you as well for the show notes. So remember that as an IT Pro TV subscriber, you'll have access to that. Okay, what you'll actually be able to see there. Okay, but you can easily find it whether you actually have access to it through downloads or you can find it on the internet yourself. It's fairly easy. So Vaughn, let's go ahead and jump in to the idea of the Cisco Cloud Center as we get started here. And I'm going to launch up my lab machine, and it's a little bit small, I understand. But we're taking a look at a few different things over here on the left-hand side, and then I'll have to zoom in and out as we do so, okay? So once the Cloud Center itself is actually installed and you're ready to go, okay, well, it goes ahead and it puts an icon on your desktop as well. And so right here, if I launch this icon, I should end up getting where it tells me here, it just takes a moment, and there it is, okay? So I'm using a little bit of an older version. I think that at least past version 5 at this point. It may actually just be version 5.0, but it may be 5.1 or 5.02 for all I know. But just kind of realize that they are at different versions. There was actually a 4.8.2, I think, is another version that's out there. But it shouldn't affect you in terms of the exam, which version has what particular features, because we're giving a fundamental overview is what we're doing, okay? So for me to log in, it's always going to do this by an email address, okay? So if I'm managing the entire cloud infrastructure for my company or maybe for a building, Vaughn, okay, I would log in using the email that I actually set up when we first got this thing set up. So I'm simply going to use the one that's provided for my demonstration here, if I can type it in correctly. That's the hardest part for me, is making sure I type everything in correctly. And I'll just zoom out because I have to kind of zoom in and out here for a moment. All right, so right away, we can see what we call the dashboard. And from this dashboard perspective, I can take a look as the cloud manager itself, or as the cloud admin, Vaughn, that right now, at least for what I'm paying in Cisco Cloud Services, for the last 30 days, about $18,549. Runtime, about 30,914 hours. You name it, you can actually see that at a fairly quick glance. Each one of these elements gives me something about the overall nature of what I'm managing here.
I'm assuming that this dashboard can be customizable. Like you can have, would you consider these widgets?
To a point, yeah, framed widgets, whatever they call them. Yeah, I don't know
in general,
exactly.
I would call it. I don't know if that's what Cisco calls it, but you can kind of move around or compartmentalize like what things you would like to see within your dashboard.
Yeah, there's a few of those different things, and we're not getting super deep in that because we're just trying to explore a little bit more. But you can even change like the view. So right now you can see where it's a view by the cloud. But if I click on this little icon right here, I can even view it by the applications that are running instead, and that way I can tell just a little bit different here, okay? So it doesn't change much here, but now notice I'm running 2 VMs is what this one's showing me. And then even the cloud status and some of the different ones here. And there's not a lot that's actually deployed right now, but there's a few things that we can actually end up seeing, okay? So that's kind of one of the key features as far as that dashboard goes. But if let's say that Vaughn now comes to me and says, hey, I want to actually run my own cloud environment. Well, I simply can come down here to admin. And when I do that, I can then scroll down to where it says users and permissions and create a user. So here they have user groups, just like you would just in anything else. I can add in a user, and I'll say Vaughn. Let me see if I can make sure. Vaughn Smith. And again, just a password. Fairly easy, at least for me, I hope. Now, in a testing environment, I'm using the exact same one, but we'll do Vaughn at itpro.tv. Company and department, we'll just say that she's going to be doing web apps, just as an idea there. I'm going to activate her user. And at this point, if there were different profiles, and I don't have any profiles that are actually created, we could do that. Now, there's other things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on, which is all the rest of the stuff here, such as bundles and usage plans, contracts, you name it. But I can say what she has access to. So here, what's the cloud environment that she has access to, the actual unified cloud manager that we have access to, the vCenter, you name it, and even import applications from the actual marketplace. Let's say that since she's doing that, let's do WordPress Docker with RDS here, if we wanted, and then I click Save. And now in a moment, it's activating a user. It's telling me that it's giving me a default policy. And then, of course, all these check marks. Now, there's a few red marks down here. If I scroll down, failed to import. So it's saying right now, and that's because this is a call service, and my demo is saying, yeah, you're not going to get access to that, Ronnie. That's what essentially it's saying here. But you can see where if there were any failures of anything I add, it tells me right away whether or not it's actually able to do things.
It's not because it's not set up within like our domain.
Yeah.
Those are just like general.
Right.
Hey, let's just go ahead and bring that in and give her permissions to that particular area, which is already part of the cloud offerings within the cloud service.
Right.
What are we in? CloudCenter.
CloudCenter. Yeah.
That's where we're at.
So if I sign back out, and now what I do is Vaughn is now a tenant of mine, right? That I can gain. And so Vaughn just simply types in her own email. Then log in. And when she does, it'll look almost exactly like the portal that I have. But now notice that, Vaughn, you're not seeing any of that additional cost that I've actually got doing. This is really your center.
Yeah, I was like, this is my little room.
Yep, your
that
little room.
I get to do all my little configurations and plug in my little servers and stuff, and then I accrue my own costs, which then I just hand over to you.
Right. Yeah, but that's exactly
pay my bill, Ronnie.
Yeah, that's exactly what ends up happening. Actually, you'll get charged for that bill. So, but you have it. You have all that ready to go, and there's actually even less. So everything essentially now is limited to what Vaughn can do. She only has one particular application profile. In her deployment, she doesn't have anything going on, so that's fine. And that's what we need to talk about next. But I can't do it logged in as Vaughn, so I need to sign back out and make sure that we can get back in here. Admin at dcloud.cisco.com. Now, if you're watching this like, hey, do I have access to that? No, you don't unless you actually have bought equipment from Cisco. And if you have, though, right, you might be able to get access to dCloud using your CCO account. Now, if you don't have a CCO account, well, that's different. Then you won't be able to get access in. But if you or your company has access to it, as long as you can use that account to be able to do so, more than likely you have access to the dCloud, and that's actually set up for an educational environment as well as a sales demo environment. And that's what I'm using as far as system goes, because this stuff can actually be very expensive here, okay? So now that I've logged in, let's compare the differences as well, okay? So Vaughn, if I now click on app profiles, I can see that, well, I have more than a single app here, okay? So here's the app profile that we have access to that we can actually check out. So notice that there's quite a bit more that we can actually see here, okay? So if we wanted to, let's go ahead and set up something for what we call our non-production environment is what we want to do, okay? Now, remember that what I said is that in the CloudCenter, it actually has that idea of making sure that we understand that it's going to follow that idea of the design, right? The model, the deployment, and then the manage of things. Well, what we're doing now is that we are actually taking this and we are actually beginning our modeling process. Now, here they've already built the modeling process, but if I wanted to do this on my own, I could go up here to this link that says model, and it essentially walks me through all the components that I want to. So we're not actually going to build one in this way because it'd take way too long and trying to decide. And here you can see we actually have a new model application profile. So from this point, I can do batches, compute clusters here, or clustering computing, Hadoop jars, runner, parallel execute, thick client interactive, Java web apps, you name it, multi-step stuff if you want to set this up. But let me select something like this, which is the N tier. So I can simply select model. I can double click on it too. And now it will walk me through where I can build my own application, essentially, is what I can do here, okay? So this allows me to pick and choose pieces that I can actually string together and build. So for example, let's say that we know that Vaughn is actually going to end up using, let's say, a web server of some sort, right? So if I select the web server here, let's start off a little bit easier here instead. We'll start off with a load balancer for her. So we'll start off with load balancer. I simply click and drag that in, and that will say, hey, you're going to install this first, okay? Or you're actually going to install that. From that point, let's say that I want to make sure that I get access to my web server. I'm going to scroll down here to web server, and then I'm going to select Apache, and I simply click and drag that in. If Vaughn is also keeping track of data, I may also go ahead and add in something like my SQL source here, and that keeps us all together. And then if I want to build the app, I simply link those together. And from this point, as you start seeing in a moment here, properties will pop up that I would now need to work with, okay? So that gives me that ability to define my own custom application if I want to.
As somebody who's not really seen this interface before, it's very graphical.
Yep.
You know, I like the drag and drop, and you actually build it. It's almost like drawing.
Yeah, to a point it really is. So in something like this, right, Vaughn, the hard part in understanding is that it doesn't seem very complex, but imagine all the things you'd have to do, Vaughn, to get everything working and running.
Yeah, and the limited amount of time that actually I've had a lot of your help running web servers and building IIS and like all this different stuff that we would have to do. There's a lot going on in the background that we don't see, which of course is the whole reason why we use these different cloud services. But this is, as the interface alone, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is, because you really only have to set up a few more things before you can get it running. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not technical. There's a lot of technical details that you have to add in, like where is this stuff going to reside? But overall, though, Vaughn, you don't have to build the MySQL server. You don't have to build up the Apache web server. You don't have to actually figure out how the load balancer works. Once you connect it, all you're doing is you're describing, like, I want this to connect to here. I want this to connect to here. And then you're actually saying where it goes, and it will do it for us.
You still have to know the concepts of what we're doing. And now, because of this nice kind of like different fields that you just drop down, and then poof, that does that in the background. I mean, if you don't know what those fields mean, or just the basics of like, what is a web server and how do these connect to a database and the different things that I need, then yeah, you can drag and drop things all day long, but then you're probably going to break things and probably accrue a lot of money.
Yeah, you can, okay, especially if you go ahead and start deploying it. But building it doesn't cost you any money, really. But getting access to everything and getting it set up, that's where you depend on the cloud administrator to help you out. But let's select Splunk. And there's only one reason why I'm selecting Splunk, because it's the one that launches up the quickest at this point for us to do this. And I'll call this one Vaughn. Let's see if it actually lets me. We'll just call it Splunk. Vaughn Splunk here. Tag name. This is important. This is where we now actually enter the environment that this is going to be set up in. Now, the environment itself is actually very important, because it actually says, here's the resources essentially that Vaughn has access to. And each of these are actually grouped a little bit differently depending on their description. And it's set up by the cloud administrator as well. Let's say that I want to set this up just for the non-production environment. Now, the reason why this is important is because pre-built into CloudCenter itself, it can actually do this a little bit differently, especially in the idea of networking. So for example, when I set it up in non-production, it's going to use the basic networking technology for what it does in the CloudCenter here. In other words, in the Cisco Cloud. And that's us connecting just to a regular vSwitch, a virtualized switch here. But Vaughn, if I were to select, let's say, production, okay, that changes the scope of it and changes it over to the ACI, which is the application-centric integrated, something. Okay, I got to remember what that actually stands for. But it actually changes the way that this ends up working instead. And we're going to take a look at that as we continue on through this. But it actually does set different parameters on what is going to be used.
And you said that the administrator set this up. This isn't like predefined from CloudCenter.
No. Yeah, this is not predefined. Well, some of it might be, like the USCD might be, but overall, though, you would actually define the environments, and we're going to do something like, at least show you. We're not going to make one because that, again, starts charging money. But overall, though, we're going to just go ahead and set that up here.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that's what I caught, and that it's processing in my brain. That right?
Yep. So now that I've done that, that means where am I going to put this? I'm going to put it in the same place that I actually said I wanted to set the whole thing up, which is non-production. From that point, there's only a next button in the lower right-hand corner. And now I get to decide where is this thing going to be deployed. I have two options. I can send it to that vCenter DC West, or I can actually tell it I want to deploy different tiers in different clouds. In other words, a hybrid environment if I chose to. We're just going to do the simple one for right now, because trying to do something across the entire tier of the hybrid cloud infrastructure, that can take a long time. And notice now you can actually choose. So Vaughn would actually tell me how much is she willing to pay for the storage and for whatever it's going to cost. Small, about 3 cents an hour, approximately $219 a month, $438, or $730 a month. Vaughn, I'm pretty sure that this is the one you're going for, right?
Well, you're footing the bill, right, Ronnie? I mean, yeah, it's going to me, but ultimately, I'm just going to pass that over.
This one actually goes to you, so that's what would end up happening, okay? So we're just going to leave that because we're not really going to build that out for everything that we have. But overall, though, you can kind of see what's going on as you actually start doing this. Now, once that's done, let me see if I can, there we go. I need to look for, there's a button. When I was zoomed in, it was disappeared, but right behind my head, there's a button that says deploy, is what it says. So if I just click on that button, it will now begin the deployment of that, and that will take a few minutes to end up working, okay? So Vaughn, we've just pushed one as far as an application goes into the actual area here, okay? So in other words, this is now getting deployed. It's going to take several minutes for it actually to get deployed, but when we do so, it will create the infrastructure. And Vaughn, you and I didn't have to go through trying to pick out what virtual machines to build, how is this actually going to end up working, what ends up happening here, but we'll be able to verify this. But Vaughn, it looks like I've talked enough at this point that what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to carry this over into a part 2. We still got to show you, how does this work in terms of production one as well, and how does this make any difference at all? So that's what we want to also show you too, and then a few other things in terms of the overall cloud administrative side and some of the things you want to consider as well, okay? So Vaughn, this is a great place for us to take a break since we've got to wait for it to actually spin up as well, and then we'll come back and we'll try and make sure that you actually see all the rest of the details.
I was going to say, bravo for perfect timing there. Of and look, now it's time to break for our part 2. So come on back and see what's next. As you heard the man, but we're going to go ahead and sign off for IT Pro TV. I've been your host, Vaughn Smith.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.